Well, thank you so much. You know, they say one of the worst times to speak is right after a meal function. So is anybody sleepy here? Tell the truth. Anybody sleepy? Okay, I'll make a deal with you. If you're sleepy, please, by all means, go to sleep. Okay? I've slept on the best of them, so what goes around comes around. So just sleep. In fact, there's some room you can lay down on the ground here and just help yourself. But don't do one of these two things. If you're sleepy, please just go ahead and go to sleep. But don't do like this. That's distracting. So just sleep. And by all means, don't do like this, pretending as if you're reading or praying. Now we have character issues. That's lying. So just go ahead and go to sleep. Yeah. Well, this has been really extraordinary. It's been very, very good to hear and to fellowship with you, although it's been brief. I'm always the richer for it. I want to get back and connect with the context of what I said before, and I hope I can drive this point home. We will always struggle with the integration of our Christianity and biblical principles when we view the Bible as a point of reference rather than the context for our lives. I can't tell you how huge that decision is and how primary that is in all things, not just the matter of leadership that we're talking about. But if you don't do that, then all of your Christian life, you'll be struggling. You'll be struggling with the lure of the world and society and the confliction that brings and the collision points that it brings with your Christianity. If you make the decision that God's word is my authority, it is not something that I just go back to when I get discouraged or I'm down, but it is my life. Now, having said that, we drop leadership within that context, and we don't view leadership as being one-off, meaning that this is something extra biblical, but that God has something to say about the people that he uses. And the other thing I want to say is this, that we don't make the artificial distinction between those who are in full-time Christian work and those Christians who are out there in the marketplace, because God doesn't make that distinction. He doesn't make that distinction. All of us are called to do whatever it is that God's called us to do. So if you're representing him in finance and law or whatever it might be, in business, whatever it might be, your calling is just as valid, just as significant as, say, mine is. And so it's all the calling of God. And God expects all of his people to operate by biblical principles. And so these things that I'm saying here today is not just for people who've gone to seminary and graduated, and then they apply these things. No, the application might look differently. Obviously, you're not pastoring a church. You're out there in boardrooms and this kind of thing. But really, although it may not be as obvious, still under the surface, you're embracing these identity elements, character elements of the person that God will trust with his assignments, therefore bringing attention to his presence and his blessing. And that's huge. That is huge. And let me just say this too here. A lot of midlife crises that will take place down the road when you're 45 or 50 years old is due to delaying this kind of thinking. You settle for something that is not core to who you are, and the failure to make those pivotal heart decisions early on in life will set you up for an explosion later on. And I think that's a huge part of midlife crisis. You've made a set of assumptions, and by the sheer energy and force of youth, you're able to sort of like compartmentalize and push it down and deny it. And then all of a sudden, you get married, you have children, life gets complicated, and things start taking place, and you can't live that way anymore. and you start not liking yourself. And so that's one of the reasons why, as I mentor younger leaders, I tell them that you've got to make hard, critical decisions earlier on that will set you up for joy and freedom later on. If you procrastinate those hard, difficult choices when you're young, you're just sowing a confliction in your life as you get down the road. Now, having said all of that, let's get back to the whole issue of leadership. I've made the observation that God is far more concerned about leader development than he is about us sharpening our ability in terms of leadership skills. I didn't say the leadership skills are unimportant. They're very important. The book of Proverbs is all about that, how to make decisions and choices. The book of Nehemiah is all about that, how to go about a project. So they're very important, but they're not primary. What is a priori and primary is who you are. And I made the statement that over the course of your life, you may not appreciate it now, but over the course of your life, you will never do any more better than who you are. I know that sounds like an awkward sentence, but it's true. Who you are is all you have. Don't ever forget that. You can lie, you can be a hypocrite, you can fake it for only so long. Eventually, who you are will tell the truth. It will tell the truth. And so you have to cultivate having more under the surface than you put on display. And leaders who are substantive, they lead with that degree of transparency. And they're not afraid. They're not afraid of revealing who they really are. So God, when he selects his leaders, he takes them through this process. The very first thing is brokenness. Brokenness is a permanent sense of God neediness. Remember I said he doesn't do double billing. It's not you and God. No, it's all God. It's all God. God does not exist to pad your resume. It's all God. And so he calls us to depend on him. Then secondly, I said uncommon communion. I mean more than just simply praying every day, but it's viewing the assignments that God's given you as your primary means of sanctification and growth and development. The gap is really a blessing because the gap causes me to press into God for the resources that I need to do what he called me to do at first. And so on your way to doing something, you become something. Now, the third pillar is what I call, and I phrase this intentionally this way. The third pillar, the third characteristic of the person that God trusts with his assignment, they're characterized by servanthood as an identity, not as a strategy. I want to say that again. They're characterized by servanthood as an identity, not as a strategy. If you've read anything on Christian leadership over the last 20 years, 25 years, a blog or an article or a book or heard someone speak on it, chances are within the first couple of paragraphs, you're going to hear the expression, well, if you're going to be a Christian leader, you're called to be a servant leader. And that is true, although I would say the dominant metaphor for leadership in the Bible is more of shepherd. That's the dominant metaphor for leadership in the Bible, more of shepherd. But serving is what a leader does. Now, let me tell you, this sounds a tad bit cynical, and I don't mean it this way, but some of this talk of servant leadership leaves me a little flat. And the reason why it does is that sometimes it's laced in what I call utilitarianism or quid pro quo, or in other words, if I serve you and create the environment, then of necessity, you're going to want to give it back to me. I suppose at a certain level that is true, but in the Bible, servanthood is never used as a tool. Great leaders don't serve as a tool to affect something. When the Bible talks about servanthood as an identity, It's not talking about giving to get something back. You know, if you give to get something in return, you've technically not given, you've invested. But servanthood in the Bible, what that's all about is that great leaders serve because that's who they are. They are servants. They are servants. In the Bible, I said this early on, leadership has nothing to do primarily with a platform, or it has nothing to do primarily with status. You know, it's not about who's the highest up. Now, again, and certainly there are positions of leadership in the Bible, but the position of leadership is only given as a platform to serve. And the only reason a person ever has a position of leadership is that they're being trusted to serve. Your credibility as a leader is found in your ability to serve. Your power as a leader is only found in your ability to serve. And the only reason why God gives you recognition, visibility, platform is not that so that you'll become a head case and get full of yourself. The only reason why he gives it to you ever is to empower and release other people. That's the only reason why you have it. And that's the reason why he breaks us and all of that, because he wants to be able to trust us with that. And it's an incredible responsibility. So our church is a fairly sizable church, large church. And the only reason why I'm the senior pastor there is not so that people will kiss up to Crawford. That's a terrible thought. The only reason why I'm senior pastor there is not so people will call around, oh, Dr. Loritts. What's up with that? The only reason why I'm senior pastor there, it's an awesome responsibility, is to remove obstacles and barriers and give people opportunity to be everything that God's called them to be. So servanthood as an identity, not as a strategy. That's who you are. That's who you are. You got to change the way you think and not buy into what the world says. Status and recognition. You know, one of the greatest things about David is that David never, ever, ever, ever stopped being a shepherd. Ever. And it all began when he was about to kill Goliath, right? David was probably, in my chronology there, he was probably only about maybe 13, 14 years old when he killed Goliath. He tried on Saul's armor, and it didn't fit. So David said, I can't go out here and fight him. What do you have? So David went out with, his shepherd's pouch, right? And the slingshot that he used while watching the sheep and taking a break. And David was always a shepherd king, always. Except for that time he got a little bit of a brain cramp and did that nasty thing. And God broke him. He died a shepherd king. Listen, you do not have to become anything that you're not in order for God to use you. You do not have to affect a different identity in order for God to use you powerfully. He made you who you are, and you serve that way. Now, one of the greatest illustrations of servant leadership, obviously, is Jesus. In John chapter 13, this is a powerful passage when you think of the context here. John chapters 13, 14, 15, and 16 is famously known as the upper room discourse. And the reason for that, it really is in those chapters, Jesus is summarizing everything that he had taught the disciples in the 3.5 years that he was with them. In fact, one person pointed out that whole section of Scripture could be viewed as Jesus preaching his own funeral, his own eulogy. And the way he kicks this off is that they come to this place They're getting ready to have the last meal together. My research indicates that back during the time of Christ, if you were a family of some substance, you probably had servants. And one of the traditional things that every household did when you had invited guests was that you washed the feet of the invited guest. It was just a sign of hospitality. And the reason why you did that is fairly obvious. You know, you wore sandals and they walked great distances, and it was just a wonderful sign of hospitality to soothe and wash their feet. The other reason why you did it is kind of gross, but, you know, back then they reclined when they ate, and you didn't want somebody's dirty feet in your food, so you washed the feet. Well, they get to the upper room, and there aren't any servants there. There are none. Jesus, the Lord of history, had every right to pull rank and pull position and do a power move and say, Peter, James, John, Andrew, Bartholomew, you know, get some water and wash these feet. But he didn't do that. What did he do? Mind you, he's the Lord of history. The Bible teaches us that he created those disciples. He would die on the cross for them, and he knew that he would cry out, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, my God, why have you forsaken me? Their sins would be placed on him. So here you have the Lord of history, stripping down, wrapping a towel around his waist, getting a basin of water, getting on his knees and washing the feet of the very ones that he would die for, that he created. And that's why Peter got so upset. He said, don't do that. Don't do that. That's beneath you. We'll do that. And in so many words, Jesus said to Peter, Peter, be quiet. I want to teach you a lesson in leadership that I don't want you to ever forget. If you're going to lead anything in my kingdom, you have to be a member of the community called the towel and the basin. You've got to serve. You've got to serve. One of the things I think I've adopted this in my life, whether it's my staff or I shouldn't call them the staff that I serve, the people that I have the privilege of serving, I remind myself, don't you ever ask anyone to ever do anything that either you have not done yourself or you're not willing to do. I don't ask people to do that. You're there to empower them. It is my personal goal that anyone who works on my staff or works on our team in any position of leadership that I've ever had, my vision is that they will be better people because of their association with me. They're the goal. And people have to feel that about you. I didn't say that you'll do things that they'll always agree with. I didn't say that you'll won't have to have hard conversations with them. Sometimes you have to dismiss people because it's right to do, but that's still serving them, by the way. And so I want to encourage all of us here that you need to view your leadership and be very careful of having people pump your head about how you're the end game. No, you view your leadership as releasing and investing in people. Wherever there are folks that's depending upon you, it's not how well you look, it's how great they are. And by the way, when you are successful and your team accomplishes something, You make sure you celebrate the fact that they did it. And when things don't work out, even when somebody on the team, it's primarily their fault, you make sure you take the hit. Welcome to leadership. Welcome to leadership.